Hi, good morning. And while we're waiting for a few more to join, um, I wish you a good morning from Hong Kong and a good evening and afternoon to all the other parts of the world joining us. Thank you. Please do say hi and put where you're joining from in the chat. We'd love to see that. I'm Natasha Tarek and I lead Senegos's work here in Asia. And I'm joined by my colleague Kate Zarniak, who's also at Senegos, Managing Director in California. And for those of you who are new to us, we were founded in 1986 by Peggy Delaney and David Rockefeller as a global organization to help solve complex issues around the world by advancing our practice of bridging leadership, which we believe leads to trust and collective action. And this particular session is a convening of the Synergos Global Philanthropist Circle, which is a community of 400 leading philanthropists from 33 countries that share our commitment here at Synergos to create a more just and equitable and peaceful and regenerative world. I really welcome you here today. And this is a collective action session on the impacts of fires across the globe. And these fires have become increasingly frequent and catastrophic, with fatalities and very dramatic consequences that are adversely affecting our planet. And the effects are quantifiable. These impacts, however, can be mitigated through behavioral change and effective stewardship, and with the idea of local to global solutions. And this is very much why we're here today, with a view to collaborate and share our best practices and understand each other's experiences and try and implement the outcome of how not to burn. The idea is in this session, each speaker will be giving a view from their experience and where they stand. And the geographic representation is very much global and I'm going to introduce who's with us here today and who will be speaking from Australia, with representation from the GPC Forest Families Minderoo Foundation and their incredible work on fire, flood and resilience, which is actually what's led us here today. And I'd like to introduce Adrian Turner, the CEO of that initiative at the Minderoo Foundation. Adrian, wave to us if you're there. And Lee Goddard, who leads the foundation's networks of collaborators and who's responsible for their ground operations and support of these missions. And we're really fortunate to have them here and leading the discussions here today for us. From Indonesia, I'm honored to have Dr. Jatna Supriyanda, the chairman of the Research Center for Climate Change with the University of Indonesia. From Brazil, we have Margarita Mora, Managing Director of Partnerships for Terra, who's joined by Sineia Bezerra de Vale from the Indigenous Council of Roraima, Brazil. And from California, we have Jenny Biggs and Marianne Adene from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundations. And of course, we're really pleased to have so many of you joining us from various locations around the world for this event. Welcome.
I can't see anything. This is literally not real. This is not real. Next door's on fire. I'm scared. Oh my god, I'm so scared. Oh my god, there's a fire down there. We're going. Oh my god. This is a real nightmare. I can't believe this is real. Oh my freaking god. I'm so scared, you guys. Oh my god. All I want is my family.
Pictures and stories continue to file out from Australia about the devastating fires. This one.
I've been so proud of my country all my life. But the Black Saturday bushfires, I didn't feel so proud, because we didn't have the ability to respond and respond fast.
Out of the ashes of our own backyard, a global renaissance of resilience is needed. When the Black Summer bushfires first broke out, we immediately responded, sending over 2,000 specialist volunteers, supporting communities with new fences, tool sheds, and mental health training. In record time, we deployed temporary housing for 257 families most in need. We listened and we learnt from the communities we worked with. We must reduce the harm caused by fire and floods by lifting national resilience by 2025. Our big audacious goal is here. The only difference is, this is an audacious goal we must take and must deliver on. And just as the Apollo mission did, we intend to make the seemingly impossible possible. What if we could extinguish any fire within 1 hour? We call this mission Fire Shield. What if we could lift Australia's 50 most vulnerable communities to the top of the list of our most resilient? We call this mission Resilient Communities. And what if we could help future-proof our 50 most fire and flood-prone regions by halving hazard exposure? We call this the Healthy Landscapes mission. What if we could realise all of these missions by 2025? The result is a fire and flood resilient world where other nations can benefit from our solutions globally. That's our big, audacious goal.
We're coming to you as a visionary and leader to be part of this pivotal movement. Climate-induced extreme weather events are only going to happen more and more frequently. Disaster resilience is a huge challenge and no one can solve it alone. We must solve it together. Some of Australia's most influential and trusted brands are already on board, and we have global partners as part of our existing alliance. Together we can do this, and our promise back to you is simple. Let's move fast with impact, and we will never ever give up until this job is done. Let's get it done together.
Good morning, all. I think it's just gone to Lee Goddard of Minderoo, but I'm actually, if it's okay, I'm going to pass to our CEO, Adrian Turner, first of all, to talk about not just that video, but the audacious and incredible work that I think together we are going to achieve over the next 4 or 5 years. So I'll pass to Adrian.
So first of all, really appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing and have a broader discussion. Apologies, there's a thunderstorm in the background. Right on cue here in Sydney. So for me, this is a very personal endeavour. The video that you saw of that swimming pool and the fires engulfing the house with the swimming pool was video that I personally shot on my cell phone, having been caught in the fires with family, thankfully defending that property. Prior to joining Minderoo, I ran a group called Data 61, which was Australia's data science agency as part of CSIRO. And Lee has had a distinguished career in Navy, being responsible and being a Rear Admiral responsible for surface fleet for Australia's Navy, as well as Border Force, Sea and Air. And we're thrilled to have Lee a part of the team. And others as well. And what we've done over the last 12 months is looked at resilience and this investment that countries keep making in response recovery when there's a disaster. And the fact that we keep on in this merry-go-round ending up at the same starting point of having to deploy response recovery resources. And what we've done is taken a step back and say, well, how do we go to the root cause? How do we actually lift resilience to these natural disasters, particularly fire and flood? And there's strong evidence to show that the impact can be reduced on built environment, society, and the environment. And for every dollar invested in resilience, there can be a $7 to $11 downstream benefit in reduced response recovery need. So what we've done here is we've taken a model of, modeled on the Apollo mission, and we've looked at resilience as a function of the hazard, as a function of exposure to the hazard, as a function of vulnerability in a natural environment or a society or a community, so that if that community is exposed to the hazard, the impact will be much greater if there's vulnerability. And we've defined 3 Apollo-style missions, one called Fire Shield, where the objective is to put out any dangerous fire within an hour, and anywhere in the country, which sounds incredibly audacious, and it is. But when you break the problem down into first order principles, we actually think we can either get there or make strong progress towards that with the rate of progress of underlying technology. The second is focused on resilient communities and lifting resilience in the most vulnerable communities to be on par with the strongest. And there's an evidence base underpinning that. And we've gone to first order principles as well in terms of the kinds of problems that we're going to be focused on there. And that includes things like focusing on leadership and building leadership in communities, providing resources for very local plans for lifting resilience, knowledge sharing, as well as new investment models, social impact investment models. And the last is focused on landscapes and lifting resilience in natural environments by reducing hazard exposure in the most vulnerable landscapes. And that the big focus there is instrumentation of landscapes to both better understand biodiversity in our environment, but also to unlock new economic models. If we could just move to the next screen for a moment. So I recognize this is going to be too small to read, but what I want to give you a sense of, and we're happy to share this, is there's been work over the last 12 months with 60 partners in Australia and some global partners as well, to break those missions down into first order principles and define the projects that need to be solved or the problems that need to be solved in an interlocked way where the whole is greater than the sum of parts. And we believe that by solving these projects between now and 2025, we drive a generational global change in the ability to adapt to and lift resilience to natural disasters, initially fires and floods, but also disasters. The stakeholder group around us includes corporations, so 6 of Australia's top 10 companies by size. It includes global non-profits like the Nature Conservancy, CI, WWF. It includes groups like the B Team, Richard Branson's B Team and others, and it includes government agencies, including in Australia, organisations like the Space Agency, like our national agencies focused on resilience, as well as state-based agencies. And we're now getting a lot of inbound interest from overseas, including organisations like NASA and others, to be a part of this because of the technology approach and understanding of technology and how to solve these problems, but also the ecosystem and the collective and the way we're going about it, and the very strong program management and impact measurement methodology that we're using here. So we are about to embark on a global outreach to build this coalition and collective from the 60 organizations and scale the program by an order of magnitude. It's currently, Minderoo's contributed $70 million, and we've have indicative budgets against this entire work program of another $160 million on top of that. And we're about to go out and ask people to engage at 2 levels. One is at whole of program, whole of initiative level, and the other is against individual projects that align with the objectives of our partners. So I'll stop there. It's very personal for me and for others in the team. We're absolutely committed to solving this. We won't give up until it is. We've got tremendous support from senior leaders in Australia, including Prime Minister, down across the board, and now it's about taking our work and expanding globally and building the collective globally. Lee, over to you.
Yeah, look, before we do take questions, just you saw from that video, first of all, from Andrew Forrest, our chair, and then of course of the Minderoo Foundation, and then of course from Adrian, our commitment. That video is very focused on Australia, but But of course, we want to emphasize how global this challenge is. We saw overnight the forest fires in Japan, of course, the West Coast fires in California, the fires in Brazil, the wildfires we've seen in Indonesia, especially in Sumatra, in Greece, etc. as well. So fires, of course, is one, natural hazard disaster, floods and others. So this is a global endeavour, a global ambition to work collectively to take on this challenge. Yeah, a mission focused, and we've got 3 core missions. And of course, we are looking with partners to focus not on just the overall program, but those 70 specific projects as we work towards the audacious aim of 2025, which is not that far away. And we need to adapt, and we need to look at these problems differently, and we owe it to our communities because they need to see a difference in 2025 as well. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Lee, and thank you, Adrian. It's very powerful, and the video was incredible at putting across that message. We're now going to move on to the other panelists, and then if you have any questions for Adrian, Lee, or the other panelists who will be introduced shortly, please keep putting them on the chat. We'll monitor them, and we'll come to a Q&A session afterwards. So we'll now move to Dr. Jatna, who is joining us from Indonesia. He is the chairman of the Research Center for Climate Change with the University of Indonesia, and we're very grateful for his presence here today. Dr. Jatna.
Hello, good morning.
Hi.
Good afternoon and good evening for everybody's around the globe. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really delighted to present our cases in the land and forest fire. Can I have a slide, please? So let me educate everybody's in Indonesia. Indonesia is a 17,000 island, but not everybody know that we have the largest tropical peatland in the world. 50% of the tropical peatland in Indonesia, in Sumatra, Borneo, and Papua. So the 3 islands that is forest fire happens, not in Jakarta, right? That Jakarta mostly is small, not in Sulawesi. The 3 big islands in Sumatra in the left, Borneo on the Kalimantan in the right, and in the middle, and then Papua in the right. So next slide. Why is that this very important? I think the fire started in Indonesia in early 80, mostly because of the El Nino and mostly because of this peatland, almost 20 million hectare peatland is started to be converted for agriculture. And that's why we didn't understand really well about the peatland at the times. So that's why a lot of scientists trying to understand what happened with the peatland, because peatland is sometimes has up to 30 meters deep, or sometimes it's very shallow. And those consist of many sulfur, many methane, and many other things. And when they dry for the cultivation, they are becoming very prone to fires. And that's why it's because of the people who moved there to the islands is from Java, don't really understand what is the culture, what is the ecology of the areas. And so that's really the problem. And you can see right now, after almost 40 years, we understand now what this peatland. So you can see that the biggest in 2015, it cost about $15 billion in Indonesian. Because of that forest fire, El Nino happened every 5 years. And that's really 2015. But you can see now it's reduced very significantly when we understood of the peatland, how do we manage that? So next slide, I can tell you about the more of this, the problem is that the economic, of course, is a big one, but the very important is that, of course, Indonesia trying to mitigate the greenhouse gas, NDC. NDC, Indonesia is really mostly from the land use change, and the forest fire is a very important. So we study very much about this and how much they lost and how much that every province that is really fires and how much that costs per year. You can come up with how much that dollars you can see the potential loss, about $1 trillion. And next slide. And you can see that what the government solution is very interesting. The government was trying to get 28 institutions trying to focus on these forest fires. And I think that's really make up that's really better. Not only one institution, which is Ministry of Environment and Forestry, but 28 institution has to be involved. And that every institution has to have a program. So that's really, I think, the government side. Next slide. If you see that what the government, I think that is really important. How do we get this coordination? This is really important because the coordination is the most difficult one. Especially the fire is outside in the remote areas for that peatland, and because of the local community who really big impacted, but wider impact, of course, because of the sulfurs and many others forest fire, especially to the other countries like Singapore and Malaysia. So the government trying to get these weather modification technologies, of course, with the seeding this the cloud during the forest fires. But the other one is also trying to understand the peatland itself. So University of Indonesia Research Center for Climate Change, we really focus on the resilience, how that really the peatland is really becoming so dry, becoming so prone to fires, and so on and so on. So, but also the government really good thing about the moratorium of forest conversion. That is really the biggest action that making that the forest fire is to be reduced very significantly. So next slide. I think that's the ideas so that we at the university, working with the NGOs, working with the government, working with the company right now, trying to understand this is really the ecosystem and trying to understand how do we collaborate. Because, my understanding when I was in 1997, I was surrounded by fire with the peatland. We didn't know where's the fire. Sometimes it's pop up in somewhere because this dry peatland can see fires pop up suddenly behind us. And I almost cut with at the time with the CNN. We were really surrounded by fire, and that's really big influence to why I have to be, to understand this peatland fires, and most of those Indonesian are peatland fires. I think the last one, next slide. And how do we get this initiative to get this thing? How to get this stakeholder consensus? Because many of those are really migrant people. They don't understand what the peatland is. Just like they are coming from Java, they're coming from Sulawesi, they don't really understand what the peatland. So when they making this, converting the land, they just burn it. And they don't know that the fire is going deep to the peatland and then show up or pop up in somewhere few kilometers from there. And that was the dangers. We didn't know that suddenly there is a fires. So we really need to have stakeholder consensus. We really need to have capacity building for those local government institution, but also with the community. The most important is livelihood empowerment. It's really important because if the people are migrant or people are local and they have traditional wisdom. But unfortunately, because of this, is the migrant come, and that's one is really important. Education and awareness is the most important because that the subject to understanding what that's really. Of course, the technology is the early warning system, sensors, and artificial intelligence and other University of Indonesia has been using this, and the rewetting the peatland so that we understand that at the time where it should dry, we really need to rewet the peatland, and research and spatial modelings, and weather modification. So this is really our proposal now. So to the government, to the donors, and to many others, trying to get really understand these whole things. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, Dr. Jetna. Thank you so much. That's incredible wisdom for us. We're now going to move to Brazil, where we're joined by Sineia Bezerra do Vale and Margarita Moura. Sineia joins us from the Indigenous Council of Roraima, Brazil, and Margarita is the Managing Director of Partnerships for Nia Terra. I hand it over to you, ladies. Thank you. Welcome, Margarita and Sineia.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And I want to start saying good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. My name is Margarita Moura, and I am calling today from the territory of the Coast Salish people here in the Pacific Northwest of the US, also called Seattle. So let me share my screen. And I want to start this presentation sharing that most of what remains of nature is in the hands of indigenous peoples. These are the areas with the highest cultural value to humanity. These are the areas with the highest diversity of plants and animals, the largest carbon stocks, and they are areas that are key for freshwater cycles. People living in these areas have the right to determine the future that they want. And our job is to stand in solidarity and support the path that they have chosen. I was raised and born in Ecuador, not in Brazil, though I do work a bit in Brazil. And while growing up, I spent a lot of time in the countryside. And by the early 2000s, I was so eager to find ways in which we could have conservation and at the same time, people's lives could be improved. And I was very lucky to be part of the team that was thinking about these issues very profoundly. And we set up this model to figure out equitable relationships between conservation organizations and indigenous communities and local communities and rural farmers. And for almost 14 years, I work on this, not only in Ecuador, but actually around the globe. And I saw how this approach worked in many places. However, I realized that this was not enough and that this is not enough. And that the main problem that we are all facing nowadays is a problem of values. Values that disappeared when we lost the deep connection to place that has been part of our history as humanity. However, the good news are that those values are not entirely lost. Indigenous peoples hold these values deeply, and we could rebuild those values with their help. Worldwide, indigenous peoples are around 400 million people, and they uphold vast areas, not because of conservation, but actually because they have a common identity and value systems. And this is one of the most durable aspects of humanity, as identity passes from the great-grandparents to the great-grandchildren that they might never meet, right? And these places persist because time-earned technology and knowledge systems result in what we call guardianship. And guardianship is the right, the acceptance of responsibility, and the capacity to sustain vital natural systems within collective territories. Great pressures threaten indigenous peoples' guardianship. And indigenous peoples are seeking recognition, partnership, and support. Niatero was established 3 years ago to respond to the calls of indigenous peoples. And we at Niatero are fully focused on working alongside indigenous peoples to secure their culture and their territories. And to achieve this mission, we have created a polycultural organization where half of our board is composed by indigenous peoples. We have an advisory council that it is mostly indigenous, and our staff has different backgrounds. Some of them are indigenous, some of them have other kinds of lived experiences. And within our work, we have prioritized the Amazon as one of the places where we want to work alongside indigenous peoples. And our decision to do this was due to the recognition that a third of the Amazon is on the hands of indigenous peoples. And that still in the Amazon, there are around 185 groups of indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. In the Amazon, you can find the largest continuous forest mosaic managed by indigenous peoples. Increasingly, scholarly data showed that indigenous guardianship is the most durable defense against fires and deforestation. As we can see, where all of the red dots are fires, and all of these yellow areas are indigenous territories. Indigenous territories are actually the barrier to fires. However, indigenous peoples are threatened. And despite having issues of gold mining, cattle ranching, soil production that actually generates fires that end up destroying their territories, and infrastructure projects and unfavorable policies overall, reality is that indigenous peoples have shown over and over that they have and that they will defend their territories from these threats, even with their lives. Our role at the Niatero is to provide funds, expand networks, and open doors to our indigenous partners in Amazonia so that they can protect their territories, maintain their cultures, and exert their rights. It is a pleasure for me today to introduce you all to Sineia Bezerra do Vale, a Wapichana leader from the Indigenous Council of Roraima. The Indigenous Council of Roraima is one of Niatero's partners in the Northern Amazon, and Sineia is going to share their experience in fire management. This picture that I put here is a picture of Raposa Serra do Sol, an indigenous territory in Roraima and one of the areas where Sineia works. So with that, I will pass it to you, Sineia.
Hello, good evening to all, good afternoon, good morning. I am Sineia do Vale. I coordinate the Department of Territorial Management of the Roraima Indigenous Council. Roraima is located in Brazil, and I think there is a map, Margarita, that we can show. Roraima is located in Brazil. We are in the border with Guyana and Venezuela. You can see on the map, Roraima is at the north of Brazil. We are at the frontier with the Guyana and Venezuela. So the Roraima Indigenous Council operates in these areas, and we work with 12 regions where we have many peoples, Acoxana, Batamuma, the indigenous peoples with whom we work. We have these two maps, and these are the areas where we work in Roraima. Next slide. Some of the landscapes that we showed here are of the Roraima biomes, because in Roraima we have a biome, despite of the fact that we are in the Brazilian Amazon. We have a savanna biome also, but if you don't know, it's Cerrado in Brazil in Portuguese, but it's the savanna. We work in Roraima through our organization of the Indigenous Council of Roraima. We have these mountains and no mountains. And we are going to start to talk about the fire brigades. We have been working with those fire brigades. How do we ask the help of those brigades, and we use the traditional knowledge. In Roraima, in the last year, since 98, we've been having some forest fires that are growing more than we hoped, and we had to train the indigenous peoples with technical aspects for the fire brigades who all work in these indigenous lands. Also in regions where we have cultures. We have three brigades that are part of the Indigenous Council of Roraima. We have other six brigades that work with us in these projects. They are all indigenous. We have in the Serra da Lua, the Pium and Jacamim. It's in the frontier of the British Guiana. We work with these brigades. We have another one. We have other brigades at Raposa Serra do Sol in the indigenous land in the region of Surumu. These brigades involve women who work in the prevention and fighting the fires, all of this work with technical knowledge and traditional knowledge. And we have another brigade in the region of Tabai, closer to the crops regions. So we work also with brigades here in this biome. But our brigade coordinator, Jadson, who is going to share this time, he will talk about the hot spots. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Jabson. I'm of the Makushi ethnicity, and I'm the field coordinator of these brigades of the Indigenous Council of Roraima. And we work with technology through cell phones using Somai, the Somai app, and the Alert app. And through these apps, we are able to see the hotspots. For example, last year, 2020, at Raposa region, we had 708 hotspots. And in the brigade of the Tabayo, of these indigenous lands, Parata, Livramento, Anta, and Boqueirão, we had 15 hotspots. And in the Manuapium region and Jacami, we had 33 hotspots. So this app helps a lot the work of the brigade, because we can follow up and we can locate the critical points. In Roraima, we have 6 months of drought in the summer and 4 critical months, very dry weather, and the hotspots are very intense. And through this app, the brigades, we can do this monitoring. Yes, precisely. The monitoring of the hotspots, we work also with the traditional knowledge, and the brigades go there to see if it's a forest fire or if it's a hot rock. The council is now 50 years old, and it's an indigenous organization working in the fight for the rights to the land, the indigenous rights, and the training of people like the brigade members. It's a work that we've been conducting in our organization to help also in fighting climate change, because climate change is here for the indigenous peoples, and in Roraima it's not different. We know that the climate change has been having a strong impact on crops and fishing and the social life, and with global warming, it has also an impact We have the natural fires. We have a cultural fire of the indigenous peoples, and we try to control this with our knowledge. But we have other fires coming from outside sources, external sources, and we have to learn new techniques to be able to control these fires, and also with the indigenous brigades during the drought season. And we want to thank Nia Taro for their partnership, and they gave us support for us to have these brigades and to be able to control these wildfires. So the council, we've been acting in many regions of Roraima to manage the fire with traditional knowledge and new techniques. Thank you very much. I hope we've collaborated. We have many information, a lot of information available to you. Okay, Margarita.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you, Sineia. Thank you, Margarita. And it was wonderful to have you join us today and hear that. We're now going to move to California, where we're going to be speaking with Jenny Biggs and Marion Adene from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundations. Before I move to them, please, if you have any questions, there'll be Q&A post them speaking. Do put them in the chat and we'll go to them after this. Thank you. Thank you, Jenny and Marion.
Thanks, Natasha. And I would say first, I am so humbled to follow everyone who has spoken, and also really inspired to hear what you have had to say and to see so many faces. It's sort of my proxy measure for the collective interest in tackling this challenge. And it's great to see. Just by way of background context, I work on the small sliver of special projects that fall outside the Moore Foundation's 4 major program areas, which are global environmental conservation, science, patient care, and our local San Francisco Bay Area program. And the vast majority of our funding goes to board-approved, long-term, outcomes-based initiatives within those 4 programs. And my colleague, Marion, will speak to the way fire directly touches our Andes Amazon initiative in a moment. But because we also recognize the need for institutional R&D capacity, we do have some limited flexible funding to support work that falls outside but augments our existing programs. And that's where my work sits. So, fire in this hotter and drier world, as we all know, is increasingly threatening ecosystems, both globally and here in California, where the orange skies in that opening video are all too eerily familiar to us too, even if the size of our fires pale in comparison to those in Australia and Brazil. But that in turn requires new scientific knowledge and technology to address it. And we've also seen that health impacts, both near-term and far-reaching, can really fall disproportionately on communities that are already facing a number of other inequities. So we zeroed in on early detection, assessment, and response technology for this limited amount of funding. The foundation's president comes from a background in medicine and medical decision-making, and wanted to explore how wildfire, just like infectious disease, as we all know far too well right now, could be stopped before outbreaks occur. So, what technology does our Defense Department already have or needs to be invented so that we can spot the small percentage of fires that threaten catastrophe in the minutes after their first flaring and are still small? We know that every wildfire starts that way. And if fire could be detected that early and assessed accurately, either as a healthy fire that could be left to burn in the fire adapted landscapes out here, or if it's one of those very few that shouldn't. Couldn't we find a way to suppress the latter while it's still spreading at an only linear rate before it starts to spread exponentially and really escape our control? So I come to this work with no fire expertise at all and have learned so much already. I think I don't have lessons that would be anything new to the group here, but at least maybe can affirm what others have already said, and also I think offer some opportunities for leverage to really make further progress. And so the two I would touch on are, first, at least here, how very fractured and siloed the landscape is, with different actors feeling insufficiently coordinated or integrated. And we don't yet have a way to know with any degree of certainty how to stitch the right solution together, but think that presents a big opportunity. And then second, we just can't think of prevention and response as a dichotomy, I would say. Every year we're seeing budgets obliterated by firefighting and recovery and rebuilding, with little funding remaining for preventive measures. And the appetite for risking escaped fires is also understandably low, even though having good fire on the landscape is a time-tested practice here. So we think that improved technology for fire detection and risk management would not only help save lives and ecosystems in the immediate term, but really also foster conditions more conducive to the needed long-term landscape management. So to that end, I would just say we are interested in learning about promising solutions and making sure we aren't missing key elements or duplicating effort. And we welcome co-funders to the work that we're supporting as well. And so with all of that, I just want to say thank you again for including us today. And to the extent that this early detection and response technology can be geography agnostic, we really appreciate this local global connection today and hope that it's only the beginning of a longer conversation. But with that, I'll turn it over to Marion to talk more about the fire aspect of our Andes Amazon initiative.
Thank you, Jenny. And thank you also for the opportunity to be here today. There has really been some rich experiences and perspectives shared. I'm Marion Aidney. I'm a program officer in the Moore Foundation's Andes Amazon initiative, as Jenny mentioned. And I've actually, on a personal level, been interested in fire since my graduate research in fire ecology and in Brazil and Indonesia. And also some prescribed burning experience in North Carolina as a grad student. However, over the past 10 years of work in Amazon conservation, I've continued to note how fire dynamics are changing, both with human behavior and with ecosystem and climate change, and how those changes pose increasing threats to communities, protected areas, and the Amazon as a system. Within the Moore Foundation, the AAI has the goal of preserving a functioning Amazon ecosystem with a focus on protected areas and indigenous lands and the areas around them. And as such, we haven't focused specifically on fire as its own problem, but more on fire through work on management plans, work with indigenous groups fighting fire, and a lot of work on local and regional monitoring systems and information tools for better decision making. We've also had the chance to work with Jenny and respond to specific emergencies through some of the special funds. And one thing that I'd just like to underscore is that fire in the Amazon is very complex and dynamic. So it goes much beyond the headlines that we've seen in the last couple of years of catastrophic fires. There are many different types and causes of fire in the Amazon. These happen in different ecosystems with various scales of involvement from local to national actors and very different goals and perspectives of stakeholders involved. And to complicate it further, as climate and land use changes ecosystems, fire dynamics are also changing and burning in places where they didn't burn before and with dynamics that they didn't have before, posing an ever increasing threat to conserving this biome as a whole functioning system. So as we heard so powerfully earlier from Margarita and Sineia, indigenous people in the Amazon have been working with fire in the Amazon for millennia, for many generations, through traditional burning practices, and now are in many cases on the front lines of stewarding landscapes from catastrophic fire. And they're using modern information technology to do this. Still, although much of the response to Amazon fire on a large scale has been through creating new information tools, such as some of those that we heard about, these aren't always sufficient for those who need them or accessible. So just to close in thinking about opportunities, and I think everyone that has spoken today has different facets of experience to draw on in this respect, but I believe that there's a great opportunity to build on the rich history and knowledge that Indigenous and local communities have for fire management in the Amazon and elsewhere, and to creatively incorporate this knowledge with science and technology-based information and tools for better fire management in these dynamic and changing ecosystems. And importantly, those types of efforts require both technology and behavior change. We have the challenge of building bridges across communities that are focused on science, technology, and innovation, and Indigenous local communities, and across scales, from large-scale fire information systems to local-scale fire management. And I think the first step to doing that is to start with these types of conversations, as this problem is a global one and is affecting so many of us in so many different ways, and again, is changing so rapidly. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Marian. Thank you. And if there are any questions, please, if you could put them in the chat. That was a great honor to sort of hear all these conversations, and I think more just to bring together globally what we've been hearing here on such a difficult and just very, you know, constant topic that we're seeing more and more of. I think what would be great is if you can put questions in the chat now and we'll raise them. I have one a little to our panelists, and whoever'd like to answer, I'd love to hear from them. But where do you feel you need partnership or more learning to get to where you want to be? I'd love to hear from anyone who'd like to go first. I won't pick on you, but if you'd like to address that, it would be really wonderful to hear. None of you are going to speak. I will pick on you. I'll come through. Margarita, would you like to? You're smiling. I'm going to ask you that. Where do you feel that you need more partnership or more learning to get to where you want to be?
I think that all around the world, and we have seen that as well in Arnhem Land in Australia, Indigenous peoples have set up mechanisms that are their traditional ways of managing fires and that have worked really well for them. And some of those practices can be learned and can be shared in other territories, whether they are Indigenous or not Indigenous. And I think that is something where we could all learn a bit more. And the other piece connected to this is the ability to merge those Indigenous knowledge in terms of fire management with modern technology. We are seeing that over and over in many places around the world. Sineia shared this in the case of the Indigenous Council of Roraima, and how they are actually doing both the traditional management, but also figuring out how to manage these fires that were never there before climate change started happening and deforestation started happening, or changing of the ecosystems, right? So I think that it would be really interesting to see how there's an openness to figure out how you can do both, and maybe by integrating both perspectives, it is gonna have even stronger results.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Would any of the other panelists? Hi, Dr. Jotna. Yes.
Thank you, Natasha. I think it's very important that local global partnership, especially in the technology. For example, Indonesia benefited from the satellite that provided. I think that's really so that we understand how many and where the hotspot is and how do we mitigate the hotspot. Because the hotspot sometimes, of course, the people don't really know where is it and how that really the problem, either in the company side or landscape, or in the community landscape, or who is going to do it. And lesson learned from us is that we really need to collaborate more in global and local, because For example, if you're using the technology and also digital technology, we recently gave this new area of possible fire by just only using the handphone to the local tribe there, instead of, because the sometime the infrastructure is not there. So the easiest one right now is really using the available technologies, just like handphone. I think that's really a lesson learned, because we have been 4 years now, our project in 5 villages, together with the university, with the NGOs there, with the tribes there, with the government, local, and also the technology that provided by the BPPT, the Applied Technology Agencies in the Jakarta, who really has all this technology there. Without bringing them to the village, I don't think that they only stating in Jakarta. So really need to be really make this pilot project, and then they spread, to many others, especially focus on where the concurrent the forest fires. I think that's
Thank
really.
you. Thank you, Dr. Jatna. I think we have a question in the audience, Tieho. I saw your hand raised. Are you there? Hi, good morning from Hong Kong.
Hi, hello. This is more of a comment or a suggestion, and it, every time I see people asking for assistance, for disaster relief and early detection systems, I always feel that they need someone who can help them to communicate the reciprocal value to people who are giving out the funding. So, for example, if you were to reach out to the foundation of a bank or any large institution, they depend on, or at least they use ESG policies to determine, what to give foundation-wise or from a corporate social responsibility. So perhaps find someone who can, communicate your ESG value proposition or an SDG metric that would be much more enticing and quickly convey the message to corporations. But also one interesting one would be, a breakdown of maybe the amount of time that is required for those early detection systems, or even the specific technologies, just so that people can, can figure out if their companies or people that they know are capable to become an outsourced resource that can donate X amount of working hours in a month or in a year to some of these causes. So it doesn't have to be, in this case, it doesn't really have to be a financial, assistance, but it could be man hours and shared technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Tieho. That was really interesting. Sineia, I see your hand is raised. Would you? Hi.
Olá. I'd like to talk a little bit about the previous question. How should we work the fire management with local traditional knowledge and technologies? Technologies have been helping us fight those fires. With traditional knowledge, with our own knowledge, we can fight those fires, but also prevent those fires for them not to spread, because in addition to climate change, when we have these wildfires, we lose a lot of vegetation, we have an impact on animals with medicinal plants. So what we are looking at the Roraima Council, we are using technology like the GPS, the cell phone with apps, where we can send hotspots that are happening through the cell phone, so that other institutions can come and help us with the wildfires. And we are also including and going further to go to see where fires are happening. At the Indigenous Council of Roraima, we have a geographical information database where we produce the climate maps and we produce the hotspots maps to help communities, to help them work and know where the wildfires are happening and being aware of this, because this is a matter of culture. When we do a prevention calendar, I am telling you that for us to have solutions and support for the brigades and the wildfires, because this involves the entire world. When we talk about climate change, it's a global issue. So if you can all get involved in this cause, it's interesting for us because we've been working on that for a long time. We've been getting involved in the major climate forum, so I'd like to share this with you.
Thank you, Sineia. Thank you, and really beautifully put. This is a
Obrigada,
issue, and thank you
Sineia.
for your words.
E é muito interessante.
I'd like to now move to Adrian,
Obrigada por suas palavras.
is going to sort of
Eu
sum up a
gostaria de
little of what we've
passar agora
heard
para o
today and bring
Adrian,
together the
que
threads.
vai
And
resumir
after that, we'll be
pouco
closing. If you
o
have any
que
more
falamos
questions, do
hoje
put them in the chat or
e
send them
depois
to us,
vamos
and we'll
encerrar.
address them to
Se
the
vocês
panelists or
têm mais
individuals that you'd
perguntas,
like.
podem colocar
Thank
no
you.
chat
Thank
e
you, Adrian.
vamos falar.
Yeah, thanks,
Obrigada.
Natasha. Can you hear me okay?
Obrigada, Adrian. Obrigada, Natasha.
So first
Vocês
of all,
podem me
thank you
ouvir?
everybody. That was an
Então,
extraordinary
primeiramente,
session and
obrigada a
humbling to know
todos.
the
Foi
work that's going
uma
on
sessão
around the world.
extraordinária e
What
muito
I
humilde
was
ver e
really
conhecer o
struck
trabalho que
by
está
was
acontecendo no
the
mundo inteiro.
commonality
O que
of
realmente me impressionou
the focus
foi
areas across the different
o
parts of the
quanto
world
temos em
too. And I
comum
captured
nessas
some of
áreas
those
de
that I'd just like to
incêndios
play
nas
back.
diferentes partes do mundo. E vi
The
algumas que eu
first
gostaria
message
de
for me was
reproduzir
around
aqui,
uniting.
algumas mensagens. A
There's
primeira
a lot of
mensagem
fragmentation, there's
é
opportunity
que
to
eu
come
acho
together
que há
to
muita
knowledge
fragmentação,
share and
há
share best
oportunidade de nos
practices,
reunirmos para
and we'd like to progress
compartilhar
that with you
melhores práticas e conhecimentos. E
in some form
gostaríamos
of an
de
alliance
fazer
or
progressos com
group that comes
vocês
together
de
regularly
alguma
to
forma
knowledge
de
share.
aliança, ou um
The
grupo que se
second
reúna
one, there was a big
regularmente
theme
para
around
compartilhar
prediction.
esses conhecimentos.
We did
Segundo,
some work in Australia that
também falou-se
showed
muito
every 10 minutes
de
that a fire
previsão, de
is
prever.
delayed.
Fizemos trabalho na
Certainly in
Austrália que mostrou
Australia,
que a cada
fires
10
spread
minutos
1.5
incêndio
kilometers square
se alastra
in 10 minutes,
a
depending on the conditions.
1,5 quilômetros quadrados em 10
We have
minutos, dependendo
aspirations
das
to get
condições.
payloads on low Earth orbit
Temos
satellites
aspirações
and coming
e
together to create
satélites
a
de
national
baixa órbita terrestre e nos unirmos para criar uma
global alliance and global network
rede
for
nacional e também uma aliança mundial,
mapping,
uma rede mundial para o mapeamento e a
prediction.
previsão de desastres.
Sounds like an interesting conversation to pursue. The other was active land
uma
management.
conversa interessante
The terrains are very different
conduzirmos. A
locally,
outra é a gestão ativa
whether it's
da
talking about
terra.
the peatland
Os
or
terrenos são muito diferentes
California's unique
localmente,
environment
seja a
or
turfeira,
the unique
ou o ambiente único da Califórnia,
Amazon
ou
environment.
o ambiente
There are differences
único
in
da
the way
Amazônia.
that the dynamics
Há
of the
diferenças
fires,
na forma
although
como a
I think
dinâmica
there's a
dos
common thread
incêndios
that those dynamics are being
ocorre.
impacted by
Mas
climate
eu acho que
change,
há uma dinâmica em comum
we're having to adapt
e
to
que
that.
são impactadas pelas
Taking a
mudanças
long-term
climáticas.
view of
E temos que
landscape
nos
management,
adaptar a
combining
isso.
technical
Ter uma
knowledge
visão de
and
longo prazo
traditional
da gestão da
knowledge is a big
paisagem,
theme as
combinando
well that
conhecimentos
came through
técnicos e
multiple
conhecimentos
times.
tradicionais, é também um grande tema que foi
We're
mencionado
doing the
várias
same in
vezes.
Australia, so we've got a program with
E
3
estamos
indigenous
fazendo o mesmo na
groups,
Austrália. Então, temos
and
um
we think
programa com
actually there's
3
an
grupos
opportunity to create
indígenas
industry
e achamos que, na
in the
verdade, existe
country
uma
where
oportunidade de
respectfully
criar
and fairly indigenous groups can be compensated for the knowledge
algo no país que respeite os grupos
being brought to
indígenas
such
e
an important
eles podem ser
area.
remunerados pelo seu
Mentioned the
conhecimento
lack of coordination,
e
not
estão
duplicating
contribuindo para
efforts,
algo tão importante. Também
that it's
mencionamos
really
a
a
falta de
systems problem and
coordenação,
an ecosystem
a
problem,
falta
and
de
that came up
duplicação de
several times
esforços.
as well.
É realmente um problema de
That it
sistemas, um
requires not
problema de
just
ecossistemas.
technology, but also behavioral
E
changes.
isso requer não apenas a tecnologia, mas também mudanças
Local
comportamentais.
global
Então,
was a
mudança
Dr.
global e aprendizado
words was really nice
local
way
e
of putting it,
mundial.
that
Foi
there's
mencionado
very
várias vezes.
specific local
E
considerations,
o
but
Dr.
there are a
Jatman
lot of what
falou,
we talked about is
há considerações
transferable
locais muito
between
específicas,
countries
mas há muito do que
globally.
falamos que
And
pode
then
ser
lastly,
transferível entre países
volunteerism
e
came
no
up in
mundo.
different
E
ways,
por último, o
multiple
voluntariado
times as
também
well.
surgiu de diferentes formas.
Certainly that's something that we're in discussions with to create a national
Certamente isso é
volunteer
algo com o
program
qual
for
estamos
people from
conversando para
corporates,
criar um programa
as well as
nacional de
existing
voluntários para
non-profits
pessoas,
to
para empresas e
engage in
também
resilience work.
organizações sem fins lucrativos para se
For
engajarem no
us, we
trabalho
would
de
really welcome
resiliência.
continuing the
Para nós,
conversation. The
gostaríamos
slide I
muito de
put up
continuar
before
essa
of 3
conversa.
missions and 70
O slide que eu
projects
coloquei
and the
com
way
as
they
3
interrelate.
missões e os projetos
Minderoo
de
is
a
not
forma
intending
como
to
eles
lead
se
or
interrelacionam.
solving
A
those
Minderoo
problems. We'd be
não
very happy to
pretende
get in
liderar
behind other
sozinha
groups that
todos
are
esses
leading in those
problemas.
areas. For us, it's really
Ficaremos
about
muito
getting the
felizes
outcome
em
for public good
trabalhar com
and making a
vocês
difference
em outros
globally. So
grupos.
we'd welcome follow-on conversations
E
around further
a
collaboration.
gente seria muito grato com continuar essas conversas e ter mais colaboração.
Great. Well, it's on to me to wrap up for today, and I haven't spoken much yet. I've been listening actively, but Natasha mentioned at the beginning, I'm Kate Zarniak. I'm with
Eu não falei
Senegal's
muito, eu
Managing
estava
Director of our
ouvindo
Global Philanthropist
ativamente.
Circle.
Eu
I will
sou
first
a Kate
want to
Zarniak,
thank
a
our
diretora
amazing
administrativa
speakers
da
and
Sinergos. Eu,
practitioners in this
primeiramente,
space.
gostaria de
Thank you all
agradecer os
for
nossos
what you do
incríveis
and for giving us
palestrantes
some of your
nesse
time
espaço.
and a small
Obrigada a
glimpse
todos pelo que
really the
vocês
true
fazem
breadth of
e
all the
de
work
compartilhar
that you do that is so
conosco
necessary. So thank you.
para vermos
First and
todos
foremost,
o
building on
trabalho que
Adrian's
vocês
wrap up,
fazem
one of our missions and what we really set out to do are to
sobre o que
build
o Adrian
connections
falou,
globally
uma das
and bridge
nossas
divides
missões, o
where
que
there are
realmente
some. And
nos
this is clearly
propusemos a
one where
fazer
there
é construir
may not be an
conexões
intentional
globalmente e
divide,
fazer a
but there are certainly
ponte
opportunities for bridging
entre
that have not yet been explored.
onde
So I think
há
this was a start.
oportunidades
And as a
para
couple
trabalho
practical
em
follow-up
comum.
steps, we
Então,
will
acho que isso foi
circulate the materials
começo e
again from the
os
session.
próximos
And if it's
passos,
okay with the speakers,
vamos
also I haven't checked with
enviar
you,
para
so it's
vocês
sort
os
of on the
materiais
spot,
dessa
but to
sessão
circulate
e
your
se
contact
eu
information as
não
well,
verifiquei com os
so that folks that
palestrantes,
do want
mas
to reach out and get
as suas
connected
informações
can.
de contatos
So,
dos
okay, Jenny's giving me a
palestrantes
thumbs up.
para
If anyone doesn't want to have their information shared,
compartilhar
please reach
essas
out to us
informações com
afterwards.
todos. E se
And the
alguém
second
não
is,
quiser
on a
compartilhar
very
as informações,
practical note,
fale
there is a
conosco.
group that has started
E
meeting on the West Coast
uma questão
that are
muito
specifically
prática,
funders
há um
of
grupo que
wildfire
começou a se
resilience,
reunir na
and
costa
Jenny
oeste,
here
que são
has been
financiadores
spearheading that.
da
And
resiliência
for
aos
those that would
incêndios
like to specifically
florestais,
come into
e
a
a Jenny aqui
conversation
está
about
liderando isso,
co-funding
e
from the
aqueles que
philanthropic
queiram
perspective,
entrar
I'd
nessa
encourage you
conversa
to
sobre
also
o
reach out to her or to
cofinanciamento
us,
a
and we can
partir dessa
connect you.
perspectiva
But
filantrópica,
the third piece is that we
falem com ela ou
will
conosco.
would love to see
Mas
where
a
this
terceira
conversation goes and
questão
the
é
role we
que
can play as Sinergos in
adoraríamos
holding
ver
another
onde
one.
vai
And
essa
so,
conversa e o
Adrian, it sounds
papel
like we will
que
have
a
follow-up there as
Sinergos
well on
pode
what those
ter.
next steps look
E
like.
Adrian, parece que
With that, I will
teremos
wish you all
muitas
good
coisas a
morning or good
conversar.
afternoon, good evening,
E com
wherever you're
isso
heading
eu
off
desejo
to,
a
and
todos
to thank you
bom
again
dia,
for
boa
spending
tarde,
this
boa
hour and
noite,
15
onde quer
minutes
que
with
vocês
us.
estejam no
So
mundo,
thank you
e
so much,
agradeço a todos vocês
and
por
take care.
estar conosco.
Bye.
E muito obrigada. Até logo.